Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi podcast. Summer is upon us, and therefore love is in the air, and that's what we're going to be discussing today. Stick around. You don't want to miss it.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Hey, everybody. It's your host, Drew. You're listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi podcast. And I wanted to get a little bit lighthearted today. I guess you could say a little bit lighthearted. As we come in, it's June now, which means summer is upon us. If not here, definitely feeling the heat over on the West Coast. And it got me thinking about the different things that happen in the summer. One of those things it being the season of love. And I know I sound all gushy and mushy, but you may be thinking, well, in the world of science fiction, what's love got to do with it, as Tina would say? But a lot of things. It's not necessarily love being the theme, but really talking about the things that make for the lover's story and the lover's conflict. Again, as we're going to continually discuss on the show, that the wrapping in science fiction, or wrapping it up in the future, or time travel, or the mind bender, the absurdity, is really just for the sake of being a device that helps tell the story. And it may be a story you've seen a million times before, but that's why it is that they wrap it up in such a different exterior. So The first one that we are going to talk about here today has to deal with the love story involving time travel. And we talked about time travel a little bit in general, about the different types of time travel flicks that have been out there. But this is about a love story that happens to be mixed in with time travel. One of those that goes in with that being the time traveler's wife, Eric Bana, Rachel McAdams, both of them brilliant. Rachel McAdams is really one of those actresses that I find she fits with a certain type, as in you would want to go after Rachel McAdams for a certain kind of role. She's not, and in my view, a lot of these actresses being interchangeable, she is someone that you want to go after to get a kind of strength and vulnerability, but as well as a good intelligence, emotional intelligence. And I mean, and she's beautiful. I mean, she's Hollywood good looking and everything, but she still gives that quality of being somewhat down to earth and being somewhat approachable, and therefore everybody can get behind her. And you like her because of the character she's portraying, not just because she's nice to look at. So the time traveler's wife really dealing with it, and they bring the time travel part of it as being something biological. Now, there's always different kinds of devices as to what enables time travel, whether it's walking through a door that happens to be a portal, if you go a certain speed. If you're Superman, you can just go around the world backwards fast enough to turn time backwards. But with the time traveler's wife, it's basically a genetic defect that Eric Bana possesses, and it goes through the story of their relationship and inserting him doing these different time periods. And it's one that shows almost in a cyclical sense that the time travel has affected him and his life and their relationship really at every point. And she gets incredibly wise to it and how to know at what points he'll be showing up, because he ends up really going back in time and forward in time and back in time enough that he's been in her childhood, and this is after they've been together for years. So there's a very cyclical type theme that is going on with it, but it's not that hard to follow. And they have a kid that can control it and go not only back in time to her life, but back in time to other periods too, because there's a thing with Eric Bana's character is he can only go into times where he existed. He can't, go back 100 years or 1,000 years or anything. But they dress it up. It's the time travel portion of it really is just a way to bring about a conflict of a relationship, basically when somebody is doomed. And if I can liken it to something, if you recall the flick, was it A Walk to Remember? I know it's a bit mushy and adolescent to talk about, but in that one, there is an aspect of doom because Mandy Moore's character is sick, and there has to be the trial of that love in the face of this, and it's something that the partner has to accept. Just as Rachel McAdams' character has accepted the defect and accepted the problem that Eric Bana's character possesses, he's very self-conscious about it. He's very doom and gloom about it because he can almost know when he's going to die. There's a futile nature to his character, although he can't stop himself from loving her. And it's one of those where, although he is the interesting character because he can go through time, that she has to have the strength to deal with his emotions and to deal with the type of turmoil that the relationship can go through on both of their sides simply because this thing exists. And just like any other film where you got one character who's sick all the time or has, epileptic episodes or, spells of psychosis and these types of things where the character has just become so not numb to it, but they're quick. They're quick to react to it because it's just become accepted as part of their life. That's what happens in The Time Traveler's Wife. It's the exact same type of thing. This is an epilepsy. This is, a brain tumor. This is, Tourette's. It's just dressed up in a different manner because, well, we've seen a lot of those films before. But in this case, it's time travel. Okay, he's gone, or he's showing up and he's naked and he's confused and he could be shot and all these other things. And she's just got to go and make the steps quick, fast, and in a hurry. But it is that story of a relationship that is dressed up in something different. So don't be afraid of something about it. Even the fact that it's a romance that to draw you away from the very cool aspects of it. And again, you're learning something about you and your relationship in the process. And another one that I enjoy, it doesn't necessarily involve time travel, but there's a rift in that as well, as The Lake House. And again, people, I know you hear some groanings. I know a friend or two that is not a fan of Keanu Reeves, but I think he knocks it out of the park in this movie. If you haven't seen The Lake House, there is essentially a rift in time that only occurs at the lake house or in the mailbox where Sandra Bullock's character is always her timeline is 2 years ahead of Keanu Reeves' timeline, and the movie's about trying to make it work. And I know that there's an aspect of the separation and time being a thing, but that's really just another movie about being in a position in your life to get it together to be with that person. And you can think about it like, oh, it's just I'm put off because there's this issue of he plants a tree in one moment and then it just sprouts up overnight because it's 2 years later. I mean, you can look at the sci-fi trippiness of the movie and be turned off by it, but when it comes down to it, this is a movie that is simply about people who love each other but aren't in the position to make it work at the time, trying to get it to work. And how much you'd be willing to wait, or how long you'd be willing to wait and see that person come far enough where it's going to work out for both of you. These are things about, the relationship. It's not about time travel. It's not about time. It's just about growth. And that's what The Lake House is really about, growth in the relationship. And it's got some great scenes. Chris Plummer plays Keanu Reeves' dad in the flick. There's some very good... Keanu Reeves is actually a pretty convincing crier. He doesn't get a lot of opportunities in movies to be emotional. He kind of ends up playing a bit straight, as you guys would see from a lot of his flicks. And the idea that he just sounds dumb, but go back and watch those movies. He's not... He may be emotionally reserved and sound a bit of a certain way, but I think he's played diverse things. I loved him in The Replacements. I love him in this. I don't think The Matrix is as big as The Matrix is without him being that character. And, stuff like John Wick or Constantine, I thought he was great in. So The Lake House, another great romantic, time travel-ish science fiction film that is really is just about love in and of itself. All right, that concludes the first segment. We're going to get on to a few more love stories here going forward. You're listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. We'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Talking about love, talking about LOVE here on the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. And I want to go into another almost subgenre here in this one. As we talked about earlier, again, love story wrapped in the science fiction milieu of time travel. Now there's the mind bender. And I was going to talk a little bit about the flick Stay, which is Ryan Gosling, one of my favorites. Ewan McGregor's in it as well. And it has elements of romance, but really from a point of obsession. And the film ends up really not... I mean, it's worth watching. It's kind of all over the place. It's written by David Benioff, who's one of the main minds behind Game of Thrones, the television show. So... some early stuff that he had done. Really, really weird movie, but really well performed. And how it all ends up, it's worth watching as far as a good mindbender flick that has elements of romance in it. But for this particular segment, I wanted to dedicate some special time to a very good mind-bending altered states type love story, and that is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And this movie's got Jim Carrey, Kate Winslet, Mark Ruffalo is in it, Elijah Wood is in it, David Cross is in it. I mean, Tom Wilkinson. I mean, the cast is fantastic for this movie, and I'm pretty sure most of you out there have seen it. For those of you that haven't, well, I'm interested in how it is you're listening to the show, but if you could be a friend of mine that just likes me and is like, oh, listen to this sci-fi show, and then I'm talking about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Charlie Kaufman written flick, so you know it's going to be a little bit weird if you know anything about Schenectady, New York that he made, or Adaptation was another one that he did, as well as, I think Confessions of a Dangerous Mind was him. But being John Malkovich is really when he popped out, making some weird type movies. Now, this movie, it has bizarre elements, and part of that plays wonderfully into it is how the film was shot. A lot of very traditional camera effects, some tricks, stuff like forced perspective and stuff like that. The way that it was shot just adds to how great the movie is. And if it had been done very clean and with a lot of cuts and with a bunch of different type of effects that would have been added later on, it would have lost a lot of authenticity, because the movie, in large part, takes place inside of Jim Carrey's, in his mind. So the mind is a bit out there. It is fluid in a lot of parts. Really, what you dream about is not always some very, beautiful, very edited, very overproduced type thing. Sometimes it gets in there and it's a little jumbled and it's very weird. And they do all of these scenes in the flick just fantastically. So for those that haven't seen it, the movie involves the characters that are portrayed by Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet. They're a couple, and it takes place sort of in the middle of something. The relationship is ended, and there is an organization or an office that can go in and track your mind and remove memories of people. Or not just people. If it was, like your dog that you had for years and you lost and it's very emotionally trying, it essentially is allowing you to have closure in the end of a relationship by way of removing that person or, animal or anything else having not been in your life, had it never happened to you. And this is something that I know is very well considered by a lot of people. When you ask yourself, when something ends, would you not have just been better off with them not ever being in your life? And this isn't even from a point like, I understand with stuff that are, emotionally abusive or physically abusive relationships that end up, they end, and the scars, whether they be emotional or physical, remaining scars of, you think about if your life would be better off if that person, if you just didn't have any memory or any knowledge or have them weighing in on, what happened. And this is almost, it's a form of therapy, and with a lot of stuff that's happening in the news could be very effective for the survivors of, certain circumstances. But in the movie, this is about relationship. This is a love story after all. So Jim Carrey's character, he goes in and he finds out that his ex-girlfriend, played by Kate Winslet, her name is Clementine, and that's important, has already had the procedure done. So she's a very, brash type of personality. It's interesting because in this movie, he's the more reserved type, and she's the more flamboyant, bombastic, spontaneous one, sort of a bit of a role reversal. Not that Kate Winslet's always played reserved types, but Jim Carrey never plays reserved. So he finds out because, she's a bit impetuous that she went out and she got this done, and now he wants to get it done because the relationship was apparently just so much of a drag that he didn't want her to be on his mind anymore. And then in the middle of the process, he decides that he doesn't want to go through with it. So now he's trying to hide her in his memory, which is the tricky part. He's trying to not lose her, so he's trying to find those deep resurgences of the mind to stash her in there and to place her there so he doesn't lose her. And it comes down, ultimately he can't fight it because he's asleep and they're doing all this stuff to him, erasing his memories, and they see on the outside what he's doing, so they're starting to zap memories that they're trying to hide her in. So now they're going way back. It's not, we're talking about childhood at this level. And one of the parts of the movie is when they're first introduced, and her name, she says, "My name is Clementine," and says, she's, "Don't make any jokes about my name." And he says, like, "Oh, what, like, oh my darling Clementine, the song?" And she's like, "Yeah." And he goes, "No, I would never make fun of that because I used to have this Huckleberry Hound doll." And that was, the song that Huckleberry Hound sang. And he said, "Your name is magical." And they bring that back in the end of the movie when they're going to destroy a childhood memory of this person, not because she was there, not because she was actually in that part of his life that he held on to. It's they didn't want to risk him going back into this memory where the name Clementine was there and risk having it end up kind of flow back. And in the meanwhile, because they show during the present tense and outside of his dream state of Elijah Wood, who works for this company, he ends up finding Kate Winslet and end up falling in love with her, and he's trying to get with her using all of Jim Carrey's old moves that he had done, and so she's trying to find something familiar about it, and at the end, the process is done. But they end up running into each other again, and they end up finding out, they find the tapes of these things, and because he had to go in, you had to say like everything you could possibly remember about this person, and so she did it and he did it, and they're able to listen to the tapes, and so they meet again as strangers, and this brings up another theme. This brings up another just sort of a begging question. In earlier when it talks about what would you be willing to do to forget or move on and to have closure, at the end it brings in another great question, because here they are listening to these tapes of them reciting their experiences with this person who they both know each other very well, but at the end of the movie when they re-meet each other, they're still given the face, the introductory part of like, oh no, they're trying to get through that membrane of being strangers where they're like, oh no, I would never believe this about you, and they're not honest with each other. But they listen to these tapes and they start hearing them. They start hearing, the dirty laundry is being aired out in front of them. So in this situation, they're presented with the possibility of, if we're going to be in a relationship, if you knew everything that was going to happen, if you knew about their bad habits, if you knew about their temper, if you knew about, their borderline alcoholism, if you know about their wanting to go out late, if you know they brush their teeth weird or bite down on their fork or do all this stuff to annoy you or to upset you, if you know that they're going to do things that are going to emotionally destroy you, but you can't get rid of that feeling that you have for them, would you still go forward and do it? And again, it goes back to that idea of closure, in that you are made by your experience and those people that provide you that experience. It's a great flick. Check it out. We got one more segment coming up. You're listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. We'll be right back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Hey, we are back, and we are talking about love. It makes the world go round. It conquers all. It is greatness in all things. Our last segment here, I want to talk about in science fiction, love in science fiction. We're talking about love in the face of everything working against you. And that's one of the themes of love, is always that it can conquer all. If you're a believer in that, awesome. If you're not, kind of sad, maybe a little bit. There are a couple flicks that to me really bring this out, and they're really different types of movies. One of them being the Adjustment Bureau, which is one of my favorites that came out in the last 10 years or so, and it was a surprise movie. When I'd seen previews for the movie, I thought it was going to be a sci-fi thriller. and I kind of stayed away from it because I don't know what I was doing. I mean, I was interested in seeing it, but I didn't see it for a while until I got turned on to it when I was deployed. When I was in Afghanistan, you have a tendency to share files and stuff, so people just start collecting, even at movies they'd never seen before, like, hey, I'm using, your stuff, and I'm just going to move all this stuff onto my hard drive, and so it's just, a big share spree. And I came across the Adjustment Bureau. I was bored. I just got done binge watching How I Met Your Mother on a day that I had off, and I watched the Adjustment Bureau, and I was so surprisingly just like blown away of how beautiful of a movie it was, and finding out what it was really all about, and finding out that it was about, then they don't say it in the flick. They don't say that this is God and these are the angels, the Adjustment Bureau, or the angels that are doing the workings. It is about defying fate and the things that say that it can't work because we don't want it to work, and that you're going to make it work in the process. And this is loosely based on a Philip K. Dick short story, and Philip K. Dick's work has been in a lot of stuff that you see, Scanner Darkly, Blade Runner, The Man in High Castle, which is a mini series here on Amazon Prime. Like, all that stuff's based in his stuff. Very forward thinker, along with Lovecraft, about science fiction in the written form anyway. So based off that very short thing, really it was about the small things in your life that, almost as a butterfly effect, these small things in your life that work towards making something happen that goes bigger and bigger. So we're talking about something has to be done that, a dog has to bark for you to be surprised and spill your coffee and stand around and freak out and therefore miss your bus that will later go to the World Trade Center that gets flown into and destroyed, and all of a sudden it's 9/11. That it's those types of things, because ultimately, you're going to be the president of the United States. You discover the cure for cancer, so therefore these things can't happen, and these things should happen. And it goes a lot about those people that do the adjustments, or the people that are trying to make sure that those things occur. In 30 seconds, this car has to pop out, and you have to see this person in the back of the cab, and you have to lock eyes, and you have to turn, and if this person stands in your way for a long enough time, you'll never be able to chase the cab, you'll never be able to find your true love, so on and so forth, and beyond after that. That's what the idea behind all of this is. And in the movie, there's this person that is destined for greatness, and the woman that he loves, destined for a degree of greatness, that they keep getting pulled back towards each other. And you end up finding out, because in the version of The Plan, again, they do not attempt to make a lot of religious connection, although you can't help but do it. They have iterations of the plan, so many iterations where they were supposed to be together. So the carbon copy, or the footprint, that residual fate from these incarnations where they were supposed to be together, it's bleeding through. And although it is not set in the current plan, there have just been so many versions of this where they do end up together, that love and that fate is overpowering and moving closer into this one, that to the point that the Bureau can't really do anything about it. There are forces of nature even above the people that cause forces of nature, which is a trip in and of itself, and it's a great flick. It's worth watching. It's got Matt Damon and Emily Blunt's in it as well. So, and I think Alex Mackey's in it. I believe that's him. So it's a good movie. Check it out. The other one that I just got turned on to recently was Perfect Sense, and that's almost an apocalypse-like movie. It's Ewan McGregor, Eva Green. It's all shot, or it takes place in Scotland. I assume it's all shot there as well. Very gray, very dreary. And in this flick, people are starting to lose their senses. I'm not talking about like going crazy, although it does happen at one point. At first, it's reports of people losing their sense of smell, and they can't smell anymore. And it's brought on, first they have these periods of grief where they just end up thinking about all these terrible things that had happened in their life. And then they lose their sense of smell. And they link that, obviously, because smell is the sense closely linked to memory. And so now that you can no longer smell, those memories start to fade. And you're not burdened with that type of guilt or pain anymore. And then this caused for some of the weirdest parts of the movie is they then lose their sense of taste. And after they lose their sense of taste, or during that process, they get this hunger. And this all happens simultaneously. This wasn't like the smell where it was this pocket of people. This was a bunch of people simultaneously losing their taste, and they're just grabbing for anything they can because they have this hunger. I mean, there's a part where Eva Green's literally just shooting toothpaste into her mouth while this woman that's trying to help her is eating lipstick. They just have this hunger, this incontrollable, and then they end up losing their sense of taste. And a really funny scene is Ewan McGregor and Eva Green, they're kind of these sullen people. They end up together, and it's really about them trying to survive while losing their senses and coming to grips with the type of people that they are, that even without these senses, they would have felt a bit empty. And it kind of goes into that, that's really what it's about. These things, these outer things that you can enjoy, but what's it all about on the inside? There's a scene where they're in the tub, and he just makes her eat shaving cream, and he just takes bites of bars of soap. Now, obviously, it's not real, but you can do that if you have no sense of taste. You're not going to put soap in your mouth and be like, ugh, because of what's in it and taste like. So he's just eating soap because they've just become numb to it, that they can't taste anything. And then they lose the ability to hear, which now we're starting to see lack of control. And a symptom of them losing their hearing is they just go bananas and become insanely violent, because there's a good degree of your equilibrium, not just for your balance, but the equilibrium of your mind in your brain is highly determined by your ability by your hearing. So they just start losing it. And of course, he says the wrong thing. It always happens in the romance movie is somebody says the wrong thing or is discovered to have done something, that they shouldn't have done. But his was induced by this weird sickness, and he casts her aside, and then everybody loses their hearing. Now it's a world without sound, which is scary. And then ultimately, they do, and it's a very dark kind of trippy movie, but in the end they do get together, and are able to see each other for the last time. Spoiler alert. So, it goes about, it is a bit apocalyptic when you look at the world, that you're losing things about how you experience the world. All you really have left at that point is to be with the people that make you feel something inside, as opposed to these other things that are, the outside senses, and the paying attention to those types of things, and no doubtedly have very important consequences on who you are as a person. Your memories definitely being one of those things. But the things you take enjoyment in, is in like, the taste of a of a cake or something like that you're losing, and your ability to hear, obviously, to not be able to hear music, which also gives you joy. That interpersonal connection needs to occur in order to keep life running. And it's a great flick. Check it out. Perfect Sense, Adjustment Bureau. Yep, all about love in that sense. So, yeah, I've had a lot of fun. So we just talked about love. Hey, 30 minutes. Nothing but love. Nothing but love. Next week, I'm getting into celebrating the new Independence Day coming out. We're going to talk about invasions of Earth, all right? This has been the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Check us out, gsmcpodcast.com, or get us on iTunes. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And don't forget to listen to our other fine quality programming. I'm Drew. You're wonderful. I'll talk to you next week. Take care.